is, I think, the first hoop rim banjo that I ever built. Now, being the first, there were several mistakes I made, but it does sound pretty darn good. Now, I'm in the process of selling this banjo, so I just wanted to make a video just cataloging it, just showing all the pros and cons of it, just so, you know, for future reference, I guess you could say. So, what is it? It's a minstrel banjo. It's got brass hardware, goatskin head, maple bridge, Aquila Nowget strings with a mahogany fretboard, and then ash rim, ash neck. The two colors look different. It might be a different species, but I think I might have also stained the rim a little bit. Now, there's several key features that make this banjo a good banjo, but there's more key features which make this banjo mediocre. Now, first thing which makes it good is this brass hardware. It really lets me tighten that head real good, so I can get really nice tone. However, unfortunately, this banjo also has some drawbacks. Oh, another nice thing about it is, look at that fretboard. That is a really nice fretboard. I worked on getting a nice French polish. You can see I pretty much accomplished that. If I play from this angle, I can see the reflection of my hand on the board, which is always a nice thing to see. So the first thing I want to cover, what not to do when you're building a banjo, is try to find some wood that looks a little better than this. Now, this came from a plank of ash. It was some cheaper wood. You know, I didn't want to spend too much money on the wood because the wood gets expensive. You wouldn't believe it. And you know, it looks all right, but it could be better. Now, this really depends on, you know, how I finish the wood. You know, I could have done something different in that regard, but also just getting something with a tighter grain that's not so porous. You can see a lot of pores and stuff. It kind of layers, it stripes layers between non-porous, porous, non-porous. So it just doesn't look quite as good. Another thing, the neck is really thick. Just adding this OG, you know, I didn't want it to go under the bass string here. So I added an entire extra ½ inch or so to the neck just to facilitate that OG, and you can see what that did. It widened it to 2½ inches at the base here, which is, it's big, it's unique, but it's not bad necessarily, because this does facilitate for very easy claw hammer playing, because this wide string spacing, it's very nice. I'd say it's about a ¼ inch, more than that. ⅓ of an inch strings, it's big string spacing. Now, another thing, when you're shaping the neck, this may not look too consequential on the camera, but when you're shaping the neck, you really don't want much material in this final section. You want this part to be even thinner than the peg head in some cases. About as thin as the peg head. Where they meet, you want to be about the same thickness, and as you can see, I did not do that. This is actually a considerable bit thicker. Now, it's not uncomfortable to play, but it is a little, it's kind of big. And also, I kind of still have this V shape. I didn't really grind down this part as much as I should have. Now, when you attach two parts for a neck to go together, let's look at this. So if you can see this, it's actually two planks. Now, I still build my necks like this. There's nothing wrong with gluing two planks one on top of the other like this. I've made some very good looking banjos that are made this way. In fact, the original Boucher or Boucher banjos, as some people call them, Boucher, they do have this, you know, plank on top of another plank. However, my joint here was kind of sloppy. I didn't clamp it down quite right. It's just, there's a very visible seam going around. You can see that whole seam. And also my sanding job. You remember how I said some of that wood is porous and some of it is non-porous? That means the sanding is uneven. So I could have done a better sanding job before I did the final finish to make it all even. Now, another note is that dowel stick, it's fine. It's fine. You know, everything about this banjo is fine. There's nothing seriously wrong. It's just, it could have been done better. And, you know, I built this several months ago. You know, I was still learning a lot. This was my first time building a wooden hoop banjo. You know, so I didn't really know how to do this because I've been doing gourd banjos, mountain banjos, and all that up to this point. So what we have here is just, I didn't even feel like finishing it because it's on the inside of the banjo. Who cares? But I care now. Now I care. Because when you look at the back of this thing, it just kind of looks a little... And it's actually an inch thick, possibly over an inch thick in some places. It does not taper at all. It's an inch by an inch. It does not taper whatsoever. It's just a massive chonker of a dowel stick. And you might think this wedge here that I installed does anything, but it's actually really loose. So I did hand chisel the hole for that wedge. So yeah, I can just go ahead and stick that back in there. And it's all right. You know, it's not the end of the world. Now, another thing I should note is that the rim is made from some stuff I got off of Etsy. Now, these rims are intended for buffalo drums, for Native American ceremonies and stuff, or, you know, what have you. This is not a buffalo drum. This is not a buffalo drum, and this rim was not built to be that. Now, the rim works fine. You can use a buffalo drum rim because at the end of the day, it's still a drum. But these rims will be cheaper. They're single ply, and they're made from a plank, and, you know, Native American buffalo drums, you know, some people like a more primitive, rustic look to those sorts of things, unlike most banjos. So you might end up with splinters, cracks, and little blemishes like this right here that don't really look good on a banjo, but they look pretty interesting, little character to a buffalo drum. But that's not what we want on a banjo. I mean, it's not what I want on a banjo, not what most people want, but if you want that, that's totally cool. Now, continuing, that's about it, I think. So those are the lessons I learned from building my first minstrel banjo. You know, get a better drum shell. What I like to use are Keller drum shells. I bought just one because they come in these big, foot-tall, just whole bass drum size, you know, where you kick drum. And you can slice those into slices, however thick you want. And those come in different plies, so you can get one as thick as this, or you can get one half or a third as thick as this even. I have banjos that are very thin. So thin, in fact, that I was kind of nervous building them because it does not look very strong. But when you have a plied wooden rim, it's basically fancy plywood that's made into a really nice rim. You know, it's the same principle as plywood. Super thin, but given that it's a bunch of different woods stacked on top of each other, super strong compared to what a single ply piece of wood would be. So that's about it. You know, don't do what I did, and you should already be halfway to making an excellent banjo. Does not sound tuned at all. It fell out of tune.